Stems in the budget.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, you guys all received a very lengthy agenda. Looking for an approval on that, or a motion to approve. So, and almost a second. Say your seconds, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, welcome our visitors. We have Mrs. Gebhart here, Mr. Engel, Mrs. Warren, Mr. Dobitz, Mr. Lynch, and Kyle and Travis from ICOM. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2A, full progress monitoring goal number 2. We're doing math this month, so Mrs. Self.
Yeah.
So there, you guys had some great questions. In fact, there, when I got together with the admin and we were talking about, they were challenging questions, which were great questions because they made us reflect. And we had the opportunity or the spurring on to go talk directly to the teachers. And I was going to try to, I don't know if you want to call it translate or reword some of their replies, but then I thought, no, I'm going to just let you, see what the teachers have to say about these, because I can say something to you and I can write something to you, but I'm speaking for everybody and I don't want to misspeak and I don't want to promise you something or not tell you the truth about something. So having the teachers give their answers was really good. So I hope you found that insightful and helpful by those. And thank you for asking the tough questions. Makes us dig deeper and try to find answers. So maybe I can just talk about 2.1 and 2.2. Unfortunately, as I said in my report, we saw our learners that were being monitored. We saw our dreaded drop at winter testing. And, when we had our meeting, we talked about it and we can make a million excuses. We could talk about, well, this could have happened or that could have happened or that could have happened, but that doesn't help us move forward. So we came up with some hypotheses and we came up with a plan of, I shouldn't say a new plan because that was one of the questions. But we have the same plan because if we remember right, this is just one progress monitoring event in our 5-year plan. So our goal isn't until 2029. So we're, or 28. So we're looking at that future, and this is just one of those things. But we wanted to combat that, unfortunately. So what we're doing. So here's our plan, or expanding on our plan. So we had talked about this before, but we're going to move spring math into K through 3, and some of the questions the teachers gave or answered were, do we have any interventions? We have interventions, but we don't have intervention programs. The teachers are doing interventions. I'll use Kelly for an example. In 1st grade, she knows where her kids are, right? She uses her assessments. She does her interventions. She assesses, but her interventions might be one-on-one or in small groups. And she kind of talked about that in her answer. But we are going to provide spring math in K through 3. If you remember right, that's the one we did in 4, 5, and 6 this last semester. And it's a tier 1 intervention. So all of the kids are getting it. It's just a matter of then it personalizes for them. And we can, use that to give them some extra help or expand. Adjusting our test schedules, we talked about that. So when we did our winter tests, we had been in for recess. It was very cold outside. We've been testing a lot. We've talked about double testing. We're doing A+. We're doing STAR because we just don't know where we're at and which one is the best predictor for that. So we know that we've been doing a lot of testing on that. And there were other seasonal factors what's everybody like in the middle of the winter? So we're looking at some of those things like, should we adjust our schedule? So we'll talk even more about that. We're still going to assess them 4 times, but which one we're going to report on or where it's going to land, we'll look closer at that. Implementing an incentive program, great question on this. Really, do we want to do incentives? We don't. We don't want our kids to be those external, we don't want them to have those external needs. But I think Greg explained, what he's talking about in an incentive program. We want them to be internal motivated instead of external, but even as adults, we're externally motivated, right? Why do we come to work? We get a paycheck. Why do we do things? Where Shannon and I are talking about North Dakota Fit. Why do we walk? Why do we keep track? Because we're going to get something at the end. So we're going to get some kind of an external motivator on that. So we're trying to look at things that are not totally externally motivating, but internal to try to get our kids to be those kind of learners. But that takes training. You know, we haven't always done this. You know, we've always offered to our kids those things from the outside. So, and so we've been focusing on our reading in Title I. It's been that way for years. We used to not have a need for math interventions. Well, now we're starting to see that data and we're having to adjust. So Greg and his staff will be adjusting in Title I and looking at what kids need help in math and expanding beyond writing and reading and writing. So we're going to try to broaden those efforts in elementary. So 2-3, we had a drop again, but it wasn't, you know, that drastic of a drop. It was a four-point drop. The kids actually he did really well when I was going through some of the data. My goodness, you know, last year our 10th graders did do very well on the NDSA plus. So, or on the NDSA test. So I'm excited to see how they do because our 10th graders did really well on our progress monitoring. So I would expect our 10th graders are going to do better this year on the NDSA. Again, we're implementing Get More Math. Liz and Ryan are doing that to get more practice and reinforcement. They're going to continue it again. They came to us, they talked to you guys about that at the last meeting, that they really like it. They feel that we need to keep it. So that's where we'll spend our money at. They're going to refine our assessments to ensure that they align with those key skills. We're always doing that. When we have late starts, we look at our data. The other day we had a meeting with Renaissance and guiding, because if you remember right, last year we talked about how with our new teachers, we haven't been giving them the PD for Renaissance, and we felt like we've kind of fallen off the boat on that because there's so many more things. So this year we did that. We invested the money and the time into bringing in Renaissance to get our teachers on there, but keeping in mind that our new teachers are going to have that too. So TLC groups in the high school, Jordan's working with them to focus on data driven. And again, we'll look at the NDA plus data from the spring to look at those relationships, and then we'll see how we do on our NDSA. Now, I don't remember if the principals probably told you that or not. The NDSA data we were supposed to get right away. It's not coming until the fall. So that makes it really tough, you know, to know how we did at the end of the year. But I moved our progress monitoring back, so on the progress monitoring calendar, so we can look at that to the fall when we get that data back. It's disappointing because we thought we were going to get it right away.
But that was one of the things that
and I think it's a matter of they just need to collect the data so they can, you know, they need to build up their database so they can understand where kids are at. So, and the high school is continuing to work on increasing and fostering communication. We had a question about communication. You know, we do tend to, like Jordan said, call parents when there's troubles instead of, especially as kids get older. You know, we don't contact the parents. Our elementary teachers are constantly calling. Like I get the communication logs. The elementary teachers are calling, emailing, you know, contacting, but it tends that when they get older, we only do it when there's difficulties, and we need to do a better job of that. And that we talked about that this year in the guardrail, and we have increased communication. Is it where we want it to be? No, we're always talking about that, aren't we? The teachers need to talk to the parents. Like, why did the parents not know that the kids are ineligible? Those teachers need to individually call those. So that'll be a big push next year for us to make sure that those teachers are doing that and holding those teachers accountable to our guardrails. So that all kind of ties in together. But okay, that's where I'm at. Would you like to hear anything from the principals or questions, or they're geared up?
Well, several of the teachers replied on there that there is no intervention for math. Is that something that we as a board need to budget for? Is that
that
program that they're wanting?
So
I'll
many of the replies there were from K3,
Yep.
right? That we don't have a K3. We're not paying for a system or a program or something like that. What we are going to next year with spring math, because we're going to expand that to K3. So we'll be full K6 spring math. And like I said in my reply, from the data that spring math has provided us, the people we've talked to at SEEK and the schools that I've talked to that are using spring math, 100% of schools have increased their math scores once they've implemented that, you know, with fidelity and for a full year too. So.
And there was a school out west. I don't remember which school it was. It was probably a school, but their scores on their NDSA went up so much that they thought that they were cheating or doing something. But one of the things they had done was they had implemented spring math, and they saw a big increase for their kids.
Yeah, equal endurance.
You know, we had this conversation about, are we teaching the test? I mean, you could say that, right? But our test now is our standards. And that's what we're supposed to be teaching is our standards. And we have so many places where we can get data and information about how our kids are doing that, of course, yeah, we're teaching those standards. We want those kids to have the standards because that's what we're, focused on. So. Director Jordan, got anything?
I just like to point out, I think one of the things that I said was we're not seeing a whole bunch of kids that are becoming urgent intervention kids that are scoring from 0 to 9% percentile rank. It's those kids that are bouncing from one testing time, they're at a 56th percentile, which is above. And then the next time they're at a 46. They're not that far below, but yet they're below. And then the next time they bounce back and forth. So I think that's something important for you guys to understand and for our teachers to hear too, is we're making strides with those kids that are the lowest of the low. And we're bringing those kids up. We've showed you guys that data. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we started the year with so many intervention kids and we're less than that now. So we're making strides in that area. It's those borderline kids that bounce back and forth. And we've known that for years, but we haven't necessarily put a target on those kids to make sure that they're above that 50th percentile necessarily, and, because we tend to spend most of our time with those kids that are urgent intervention. So.
That's something with NDSA too. Those bubble kids are the ones that make or break you because they could go to the range depending. And some of those kids might be affected by those little things, those seasonal factors, absences. We have high absences. My principals are dealing with it every day. And it's a very frustrating thing. And you've probably seen in the legislature that they're doing studies on it. But our kids that are missing days and days and days, and parents will call in and not tell the truth and just get their child out of school. And there's nothing that we can do about it. There's no help. If you guys probably have kids that have missed 20, 30, and Jordan's trying to do stuff, but he gets pushed back from homes and, trying to get the kids. And we require a doctor's excuse, if they're ill, but we can have kids that are gone and the parents will just call and say they're gone and homes and trying to put our foot down, but it's just absences are hard on us.
With the incentives, is that something, do we feel like that's gonna help the bottom kids as much as top? Because the top kids probably don't need as much incentive, they're just more internally motivated, but those lower.
I think Jordan has, like I said in my reply, right? I think we've seen from the older kids, the 7th through 12th graders, it's those kids that are in the middle that bounce back and forth that we feel like we're targeting with an incentive program. And, those kids that are on IEPs, those kids that are in that urgent intervention, those kids, if they're great, if they reach that incentive, great, but that's not the target there. That's the kids that we're targeting with that.
I made a bet with a kid on one of our interim assessments. It was like, hey, if you get to a score, the level 3 on this, like whatever the bet would be, and he was 2 points away. Well, the first time he took that interim, he scored in the level 1. Like that just shows, like, hey, I was like, how come you guys can't do this every time? Well, you gave me something to shoot for there. Like I was like, like it's just like that factor of it, just giving me something there. So even a kid that you would look at and see, oh, like they're at that urgent intervention, they're actually capable of getting that. It's not every case, but
Right.
I just want to say thank you to Jordan and like you guys are looking your hands off and the teachers. This is helping for all you guys' work that you're putting into this. And
No, these guys are the ones that do the work. I just report on it.
I know, I've been in there. We appreciate all you're doing to help meet these goals. We'll move on to item 3. We've got a very, very lengthy consent agenda. I'm sure you guys have read through everything.
Madam President.
Yes. Oh, can we have a motion to accept the edible progress motion? So we move over to Dave. Or Dave makes the motion. Do I? Robson seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same things. Passes. Moving on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? That moves. Do I have a second? Second. Nicole seconds. Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Carlson.
Yes.
Day.
Yes.
Sire.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Feinbach.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 4, everybody had reports in their packet. No action needed on that. Item number 5. Items for discussion and possible action. The first item on that is relationship with vendors discussion, and I had asked Anna to add this to the agenda. With our facilities committee that's been meeting and just with the board as general, we thought it would be a good time to review relationships with vendors as a board and as committees of the board. Just a reminder to everyone, we have policies in place for this. We have policy BA, which is our school board ethics. Just being aware that the strength of the board is as a board, not as individuals. So board members have no authority or power to act on behalf of the board, whatever may out of meeting commitments. Number 15 under that, being vigilant against the appearance of a conflict of interest. Also under that, BA-BR1, school board ethics regulation. Avoid making pledges to members of the public concerning an upcoming or past board agenda item. Raise your board meetings after having a chance to hear all perspectives. Not represent themselves to the public or school district employees as having official authority to act on behalf of the board unless delegated. We also have policy DEBE, which is employee relations with vendors, which doesn't apply to us as a board, but does as employees. So just a reminder to all board members, all committees of the board, not to be making any commitments on behalf of the board, not to be reaching out on behalf of the board on anything. If you have anything that you think should be reached out, that needs to go to Mrs. Snell, and she needs to either delegate that or do that herself. And then it needs to come to the board as a recommendation at a vote. Anybody have any questions on that? Comments? Nope. Okay. Got that cleared up. Item B on there, approved contract with Icon Architects. Patty and Brian, would you guys like to bring that recommendation from the committee forward?
We'd like to take committee as sign papers, and then contracting out Icon. And we have the majority of the committee that is signed, so we'd like to go forward. Approval from the board to sign a contract with Icon.
And I think I threw that, and that was the entire committee, correct? There was somebody missing on their signatures. So we've got a unanimous recommendation from the committee to hire Icon Architectural Group to lead the planning and design facility improvements for our district. And that was dated on April 2nd, 2025, with all signatures present on there and all the committee members. So could I get a motion to approve the contract?
Do you want to hear from their
Yes,
presentation?
absolutely. Sure, let's do that. You guys want to come here? Come on.
Yeah. Stand or
You can stand over here.
Representative.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. I will pop this on the screen. Okay. Again, my name is Kyle Kavami here. My name is Kyle Kavami. I'm one of the principals at Icon. I lead the pre-referendum efforts for all of our projects, working on maybe 15, 16 different K-12 projects right now between North Dakota, and then we have one in Montana and one in Minnesota now. And so my role through all of these projects is generally to help the communities come to some sort of consensus, make sure that whatever that consensus is something that's derived from the community and not from necessarily the board or the administration of the architects, and help go through that whole process, which will show you kind of in brief, but then we can go in detail based on what kind of questions you guys might have and how we can explain better.
Yeah, I'm Travis Jordan. I'm new to Icon. I joined last June. I served 20 years in education. Most of those years as a superintendent or administrator. Most recently, I was superintendent in Beulah for the last 8 years. Your discussion on testing is all too familiar with me. I serve to serve, basically. I serve in a role that I've been on both sides of this spectrum. Icon did some work for Beulah, starting in 2016, ending in 2020. So we worked for 4 years. And so I was on that side of it and was very green and never went through the process, had no clue, and now going through it on both sides. And so I'm here basically to help you guys as a board and the superintendent have as less anxiety as possible throughout this process.
And on there too is one of our principal architects. We have a few different architects that work on K-12 projects as leaders, and then a bunch of support staff. So depending on timing, we'll have additional people at meetings. Sometimes it's the two of us, sometimes there's 3 or 4 of us. It really just depends on what we're trying to cover. I'm going to, in an effort to try to go through how we work, I guess, if that's all right. And I would say the main presentation is maybe like 7 slides, and then I probably have like 45 slides, just based on what kind of questions you guys have to maybe be responsive to answer your questions. The situation that you guys are in, I guess, just to start with, is just very normal. I don't know that there's a single district that we're working with that's just been like, we've already got it figured out, we've got the money, just get in here and design it. Like, that's never the case, right? It's always like, there's a need, how do we even get this done, right? And how do we understand it? A lot of the work that we do, well, I should just give you a little background. So just 10 seconds, just we have 6 offices across North Dakota and one in Bemidji, and we've been around for about 23 years. We have a staff of just a little under 50, and we spend a vast majority of our efforts as a company working on K-12. So this is just like this isn't even a complete list, but just a smattering of maybe I'd say the highlights or the larger projects. We work on everything from, Emerado, we added a music classroom for, less than $1 million, all the way up to we're still wrapping up the high school in Mandan. So the gamut of projects, there's no project that's too small or anything like that. But at the same point, we are able to work on bigger projects. Just to give you just a little bit of that. So I would say, I'm gonna maybe go to most of the projects, when we start our process, it's what information do we have, and how can we use all the facts to drive the community to tell us what it is that they want us to do. And we have been immensely successful in referendums, specifically because we try to take the emotion out of it. We try to take the prescription of engineers or architects out of it, and we try to give as much data as possible to a group of citizens. And in this case, you guys have already formed that, which is amazing, and already have that, and empower them with the facts to make decisions. And that tends to lead to projects that just pass way more often. So whether it's, Dickinson, where they had 3 back-to-back failed votes, and then they bring us in and we pass, or Grand Forks that hadn't passed a vote in 38 years, and we got a vote passed there. And I would say very difficult situations where there's communities that maybe felt like there wasn't enough information shared, maybe there wasn't trust in how money was being spent, maybe they felt like there wasn't enough people at the table involved in the decision making. Those are all very normal things. And as I've read through everything that you guys have done and accomplished up until now, I don't think I'm surprised by anything, right? This is the world that we live in right now, where everything that we do is scrutinized and questioned, and we support that. Because if you do things the right way, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to answer questions and be transparent. And so what's great is that through this process, it tends to take the pressure off of the architects and the board and the administration, because ideally, none of those parties should be driving the decision. It should be a group of citizens that have representation from the administration and the board and professionals, but it should be a group decision versus, we're sitting here, thinking about what needs to be done, and then just the taxpayer gets a letter in the mail that there's a vote, right? So as we go through this process, and feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, as we go through this process, at the end of the day, like, your data should tell your story, right? It's not the opinion of the superintendent, it's not the opinion of the board, it's not necessarily the opinion of a committee member or somebody out in the community. As we go through this process, your data will become so real that it tells the story for you, right? And your data shows that you have close to $30 million in deferred maintenance for the next 10 years. And so that data will be apparent to everybody that looks at it. And at the end of the day, it's not an opinion. This is our reality, and how we move forward. So this process takes us through that, and it's a full process.
Yeah, and I shared with the committee in the little over a decade that I've been doing this, the process changes in every district. We learn something almost every time. And I'd also say there's only one district ever that we've been hired and then just nothing happened. We've always found a way to make some sort of project make sense to the community. And so because of that, that's why, if you look through our contract, we do things a little bit differently. There's a lot of our peer firms that come in and do a lot of reporting and have a fee for that. And for us, we found it's a much easier discussion when we talk about the months that we've invested in the community, that we don't get paid until the taxpayers say pay us. You guys don't pay us. The administration doesn't pay us. It's only when the community says, yep, that makes sense, do we get a paycheck. And so because of that, it tends to take a lot of the out of town consultants that are just trying to make a buck and then disappear, because literally we're not, right? Like, this is our goals should align with the community even more than you guys, because that's how we function as a business. And so it's been very successful. But I'll just kind of go through these steps and talk about it again at a high level, and then feel free if you have questions to stop at any time, and we'll kind of go through it. But the assessment, you guys already have a facility assessment. One thing I would recommend, and then we did talk about it in the committee, is that we would like to review it and potentially maybe amend it, and potentially maybe bring in our partners that we work with to just review it and see different things. We have structural, so Icon, we're architects, as that's our main business. We do have a couple of structural engineers that do some of our projects, not all of them. And then we do have an interior design team that does some of our projects, but not all of them. But our main business is architecture, and we purposefully don't have electrical and mechanical engineers in-house. There's other firms that do it all. There's different strategies to that. And our strategy to that really is that you kind of need some constructive back and forth. And when you think about engineers, we love them. My wife's an engineer. But sometimes when you engineer the perfect solution, you miss the human factor of, okay, if I'm willing to put a fan on in this room 1 week out of the year, can I save 10% on the budget because it's not perfectly designed? Or we're not designing the absolute perfect load under the worst case scenario. We don't believe in that with structural engineers. We do believe like buildings should just always stand up. We're opposed to collapsing buildings. So that's a non-negotiable. But we have lots of our partners where we talk about different solutions as we look at mechanical solutions and say, okay, we get this is the perfect thing and this is the right way to do it. But what's the balance? Like, what's the different ways that we can kind of attack the problem that might give us most of the benefit and reduce the cost? And so sometimes, and I just say generally, and this is not in relation to the firm that you worked with, I would say there's half a dozen firms that are more engineering-led assessment firms. And part of that issue could be that, if you look at the amount of dollars, associated to classrooms or to common space or to student improvement of outside of mechanical, to me that it's just, it's really hard to tell the story of Fresh Air. It's a lot easier to tell the story of your classroom now has this space, or you now get this advantage, or you have a new shop, or so it just gets very difficult. And so when you look at how we balance that, it just, again, we want to have team members, we aren't mechanical and electrical engineers. We bring those in, but it's always a good dialogue. And that dialogue isn't behind closed doors. That dialogue is in front of the committee, or that dialogue is shared via email, so that everyone can understand, what we're trying to work for and what the goals are. And point being is that we would review, understanding that, looking at the purple one, so the community committee kickoff, it's just so great that you guys already have. We normally have to come in and say, please board, hand over responsibility to helping advise you. Granted, the board still has to make the call, but can you get a citizen committee and empower them to make some decisions and bring those back to the board? So you guys have already done that. We always recommend, not too much staff, not an overrepresentation of, students with, or parents with young students or older students, or, make sure you have business owners, folks in the ag community. You've got to have a good mix. And I feel like you guys have that already, which is great. And then as you see through the master planning process and discussions, so the green, so that's really, your committee's established, and that's where we're working with, okay, we do tours. You guys have already done that. We present the assessment and we say, okay, here's the problems. And we ask the committee, what's your priorities, right? And then we say, okay, how are the different ways that we can address those priorities? And sometimes that's 3 meetings, sometimes that's 10 meetings. It really just depends to get to the point where that aligns with a budget and a tax impact. And those things can't happen in a vacuum. It would be great to build a whole brand new school, but your debt limit probably doesn't support it, or doesn't support it, and your taxpayers would never pay for it anyway. So let's establish what that would cost, which you guys do have some of that information, and then move on. But due diligence says that we still need to answer that question, right? And then go through it, and understand what our different opportunities are. And then ultimately, we try to be as we try to integrate with as many independent consultants as possible. And it's just like, how do we keep the cooks from working together? And then for us, that's isolating so that you don't have too many, like, if you come to a meeting and there's 10 Icon employees, that's probably something's wrong, right? So what we say is, we have independent people that we work with the electrical and mechanical engineers. We also do believe in doing an independent survey. You guys do have some survey data, and actually quite a bit of survey data. And so sometimes, I'd say most of the time, once we get a recommendation from whatever that group is, we hire an independent company that does statistically valid, individually numbered surveys that go to each residential house. And what's great is that just like you've already conducted some, you accidentally inform a bunch of people about your school, and you get them to weigh in on what's their priorities, what would they support, and how much would they pay. That's been immensely powerful. From the Devil's Lake vote. If you go back and look at their vote that they had 2.5 years ago, and look at the board meeting, I stood in the board meeting and said, this will not pass. I said, my recommendation is do not do this. And they did it, right? And then it didn't pass. And then we made a couple changes and it passed. And what's great is that, I have the relationship with the board members where they're like, you're right, we should, right? Like the survey gave them some really good information about what to do and how much the district was willing to pay. And I do think you have some of that, and I don't necessarily think you have to redo that, but I think when we get a little bit further down the road, we can talk about if that's something that you want to spend dollars on, because it will cost, it's normally costs about the same amount as a special election. So I like to say you can either have a vote and roll the dice, or you can do, the survey process, and then and then you'll still, you do you'll hold an election if that's necessary. And so going through this process, the light speed version is like, 7 to 9 months. We've had, in Killdeer, it was 2 years from when we were hired till the vote. And it just really depends. And what's amazing there is that, and I think I did tell the story, is that we were working for so long and did the survey and all these things. And the meeting that their board called for a vote was the same meeting that they closed the school for. And the vote still passed within 0.5% of what the survey said. Because we took the time, we had to do like all Zoom public meetings and it was just horrendous, but we had so many prior meetings. We had a strong committee. We went through all the due diligence that it passed. And so we just have a lot of faith in this process of what we go through and all the different things that we do. So based on that, what we try to make sure we understand is that, does everyone understand the process that we went through? Sometimes with a lot of data, you just lose people. You've got to get the bullet points very clear. You've got to make sure that the average person can understand these 5 things, right? Did they explain the process of how they got here to me? Do I understand the needs? Simply, right? Do I understand the goals that they've got? Because the needs and the goals should never be the same, because that means you're asking for too much. You should be prioritizing and phasing and planning. It's just, you're never going to have enough dollars to do all the things, but you should show people that you have plans and you're thinking that. And then people should understand, if they're reading something, they're being engaged, but they should understand all the different ways. It might be that we go and we talk to a book club or Knights of the Columbus or whoever might be a group. They are hearing us, but do they know that it's not a special thing, right? We're talking to all the different people. And then ultimately planning for future growth. And sometimes that growth is, in Jamestown's case, we're planning for their enrollment is declining, but that doesn't mean that there's actually not ways to change their facilities that will actually allow them to operate more efficiently. And it's very backwards, but it's like, we're going to build a school to save money. And so their survey just went final on Monday, and it'll be hitting mailboxes next week. So it'll be really interesting to see where that lands. But if your public can't see these steps, and then it's not going to pass, right? And so we've just had a lot of success going through all of these different things. One of the things that I would recommend that came up in our conversation, and I guess I should just go back to what we know. Right, so you have a lot of HVAC mechanical issues, right? A lot of things that need to be replaced. And I would say, even in this group, the community group, there was debate on how to solve it, which comes first, what's the right solution, what do you break up, what do you do now? It was a healthy debate, I would say a heated debate, and lots of strong opinions, which is better than people sitting around the room saying nothing, to be honest, right? We want people that care and actually speak up. But we do feel like there probably needs to be just another investigation of how you are solving for X, basically. You have these needs. Is there a different way to attack this? And one of the things that is really interesting, and we brought up that we have different consultants, but there's a company that we've just recently been hooked up with, and they haven't even bought us a cup of coffee or anything, so this isn't a pitch and we don't get any money or anything like that. But they use like drones and thermal imaging and AI, and I can't explain it as good as they can, to go around, and they can actually look at each wall and window pane and give you the R value or the value of insulation, how much heat loss you're having. And they can even go down to, they can go into with the administration and say, okay, what are your utility costs? What are you paying for X, Y, and Z? And they can say, this window is costing you $12 a month. This window is costing you 5 cents a month, based on what the optimum performance of just a standard. And what's great too, is we can set what the standard is. We are not going to put triple pane windows in the school. It would be great. It's not going to happen. No, that's just the truth of it, right? So why compare it against triple pane windows? Let's talk about what means and methods and constructability that we can actually do and the taxpayers will support. So I told them about the conference. It was really spontaneous because we met, and the next morning I met with them and I said, oh my gosh, this group was debating on windows or units or this, and I'm like, you could settle that really quickly. So they're very eager to work with us, and so they wrote a proposal that's very aggressive, that they would model your whole school and turn you over a dashboard that shows where your money is going and how you can change it. They aren't tied to construction. We have no connections with them at all. To be honest, it's a very interesting piece of of software. And after speaking with them, we are working with Fargo Public Schools, and they just hired them for their first building as a trial as well. And they come in and they will look at each space. And so they've already spent time. They've mapped out the school. They've sent a proposal. I've shared it with your superintendent. And I have all of that, and we can go through that. But that's a perfect example of, how can we get an independent person in here that will never make a dime off of construction or design? Their goal is just to provide you good information so that you hire them again. We love that, right? For us, that's powerful. And so something like this is an option that I would say, along with us reinvestigating the information that you already have, we would strongly support if you were to engage these folks and have them come out and provide this information. I think that your committee would probably chew through all of this, because you do have some very technical folks on that committee that understand systems and buildings. It's really neat. So it's just an example of something that I think we should consider as we go through this process.
When it maps the building too, they will find, or it'll find the cracks in the building and some areas that they thought deficiencies of the building itself, right?
Yeah, and the roofing, and yeah, even like they'll say, yeah, the tuck pointing here is cracked enough on this brick to where it's leaking. Like they can identify that, which short of getting ladders up there and like scoping, like it's just we're very excited. I plan to bring this to like all of our clients that have, I'd say, 80 to 100-year-old buildings, which is most of North Dakota schools, right? So again, taking the guesswork, and they don't care. All they want is to provide you with good data. And that's the other reason we like using independent surveys and there's nothing wrong with SurveyMonkey, or there's nothing wrong with integrated solutions of surveying. But if anyone can gain anything, there's just that conflict of interest that the public will never get away. So that's why we've come to the point here where we're saying, let us work, don't pay us, because there's hard to argue conflict of interest when we're spending our money to try to do something for the community. If we're not doing a good job, we don't get paid. They're the one that pays us. And so that's not something we've always done. That's something that maybe 6-7 years ago is just evolved because we stand in front of enough of these meetings and realize, that 10 or 20 grand just isn't worth it, right? Like, because now we're automatically the outsiders that are just getting a paycheck.
I can speak for Beulah. We didn't pay Icon for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they came, I don't know how many times you were at our school, but we didn't pay for 4.5 years. Then the other thing I'd say, because he's talking, obviously you had a failed referendum a year ago, and as a speaking not from Icon, but as a former superintendent that's gone through this, it's very common to see bond referendums fail in their first time. We just talked about Dickinson and Grand Forks. And so, you may have folks out there saying, well, maybe you messed up. Well, I'm here to tell you as a board, you haven't messed up. I mean, messing up would be doing nothing, right? So you've engaged the process. You're trying to get as much information out there as you possibly can. And so when it comes down to it, you shouldn't feel bad that you had one fail, right? It was the tax impact, which your surveys indicate the tax impact was too high, and maybe some misinformation went out there. But as a board, you're doing exactly what you should be doing, regardless of what other people are telling you or not telling you. I mean, you've engaged in the process. Not engaging would be wrong, right? The last referendum that passed here, that was a general obligation bond, was over 50 years ago. So 51 years ago, your taxpayers haven't had the excess taxes that they could have for the last 50 years, and so as a board, I think you're doing a great job. I'm not speaking for Icon, I'm just speaking from what I see, and engaging in this process is a smart idea.
Yeah, I don't want to go 4 years without getting a paycheck generally. But we had to basically make him quit his job and come work for us to recoup that. Anyway, so I'd love to hear your thoughts or questions. That was super, super high level. And I have like 50 slides because I'm anticipating some sort of questions. I can show you communication things. I can show you survey stuff. I can show you how we report, presentation materials for public meetings. How can we help you make sure you feel confident that, again, doing something is the right thing. The committee could say do nothing, but you guys have done the right thing by asking a committee to look at it. Yeah, so what kind of questions do you guys have, or thoughts or concerns?
I wrote a couple down, so okay.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I've had a question from people of what happens if we don't go to a referendum and it's the decision is made to do something else for finances? What happens with you guys for getting paid?
Yeah, so if our contract says that we don't get paid until a referendum passes or the board authorizes us to work on a project. So
Then what's your role after what would be your role after, let's say, referendum passes, where we decide to go forward with the project?
yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah, once it passes, and shovels hit the ground, Kyle and I don't necessarily go away. He probably goes away more than I will. I'm there to help you, like, through the process, because, like, and I'd go back a little bit on that, as not speaking for ICON again, but I would never do a project without professional services. So, like, if I go back to superintendency, there's gonna be no way, shape, or form I'll ever take something on myself as a superintendent. My job then, I will be there to answer any questions that you might have, help the architect world understand school finances, and help the school understand the architectural world. So I stay there. We also have obviously other team members that come in, and we have bi-weekly meetings that go through the process. And so we are there 100% of the time, pre-referendum. Referendum passes, another group comes in, but that doesn't mean communication ends. You'll see less of Kyle probably, but you might see a little bit more.
yeah.
Then would ICON then become our architects?
Yep, yeah, so we become your architect, so I'm on the screen right there. So this is just the different phases. I'll go so once a referendum passes, then we actually go through the traditional phases of design. So programming, during a referendum process, we will go through the programming exercise, and we'll go through part of the schematic design, but we'll redo that once the referendum passes or a project's authorized. So programming is how much do you need? What kind of space do you need? Where should it be? Adjacencies, as you look through your spaces, you kind of have that red, green, blue assessment. What we do is very similar. We kind of just look at DPI recommendations and compare to what you have. And what often happens is you'll have too much of the wrong space and not enough of the right space. And so how do we solve for that? Schematic design is just, I'd say your building plan would normally be 2 sheets of paper at schematic design. It's like, or 3, it's first floor, second floor, third floor, right? And it's just understanding what we're doing at a very high level. Design development is then when we go a step further, and those 2 or 3 sheets become like 40 sheets. And that's where we actually are making sure, all the doors are swinging the right way, and you've got appropriate ADA access and all the different things. And then construction documents, that 40 sheets will go to about 600 sheets. And that's where it'll go to, where exactly does this go on the wall? Where does each outlet go? Specify the colors of the paint, the colors of the carpet, all those things, how things attach. The construction documents, then that's what actually gets bid out. And then during bidding, even with a construction manager, if there's questions, a contractor will say, hey, I know you got this tile, but I can get this cheaper. Can I use this as a comparable? So that comes to us, and we have to approve it, right? And say, yep, go ahead, submit that. You still don't have to accept it, but we just allow them to submit it. And then finally, construction administration. So if you have a construction manager, they have a site superintendent that's here every day. That's their full-time job, 8 to 5, 8 to whatever, right? They've got to be here. For us, we are construction administration. So we're checking, we're authorizing pay apps. So like they're saying, hey, we installed all this flooring, so we want to get paid on it. So then we come out once a week, once every other week, and say, okay, yep, they installed it. Or we'll check things like, let's say they're pouring a slab. We would check things like that. We come in critical times, but we're not here every day. That's what a construction manager is for. So we're just making sure that project goes through according to our specifications, but we're not checking each room. We would do that at the end. We would do a punch walk where we would check each thing. That is part of it. So go ahead.
Yeah, and if you choose construction manager, Everest, we facilitate that process. So like, if you have to hire a construction manager, you want to hire a construction manager, Century Code is very specific on how you do that, who needs to be in the room and that sort of thing. We will facilitate that process with the school district to make sure that it's done.
Did you hire one in Beulah and would you recommend it?
I would never do it. So,
Principal Marion.
because what happens if you don't is your superintendent gets tied up doing things that she's not necessarily trained to do, and it takes her away from the stuff that you talked about at the beginning of the meeting. The educational stuff takes you completely out of that and consume you. So I would never do a project without a construction manager. At risk.
Yeah, we say if it's a project that's less than $4 or $5 million, isn't a messy renovation, or isn't where there are students occupying a building, then those are like the three triggers. Like, do you have those three things? And I'd say you guys probably have all three of those, right? So under no circumstance would I recommend that. You guys can do whatever you want to do, but I think it makes a lot of sense in this case. And a good CM should provide input and value as we're going through design. A good CM should also go out and get bids. Their job is to sell it to other contractors and get as many people bidding on projects as possible. Timing, is also great. We just had Dickinson bid 2 weeks ago, and we had huge responses, and bids came in way under like 10%, like amazing bids. Because the current state of the world right now, public projects really are all that's going on. So we've just seen a lot of activity for the projects that we have going on, which is mostly schools. So that's another positive thing. But again, the CM went out and sold it to a bunch of, Dickinson is hard to get bids. I imagine that, you guys are in a spot where you'll probably actually pull north and south, and you probably want a CM that's actively marketing your project to just get as many bids as possible. The other positive to using a CM is that, let's say, we're working in Hatton, and Hatton has Hatton Granite, and they have a window covering, it's a blinds company. We were able to pull those two pieces out of the bid. So like there was one bid just for granite and kept every penny local, versus if you just bid it out and you get like multiple prime, which would be a general contractor and electrical and mechanical. That general contractor, you don't have any say of what's under them. You just take the lowest responsible bid. So the Century Code is very strict, even on who's in the room. I mean, you need to have a licensed architect, a licensed engineer, a licensed contractor, representation from the school. So the questions that you ask, the weighting of the questions, and we do it, multiple times a year. So it's very, very normal, and we can help through that process.
I think I know the answer to this because I watched the video with Hillsborough. But when we have these community meetings, is ICON the ones that are up front? And it's not the school, but you guys are there presenting the community meetings?
So it should be both. And ideally, it should be superintendent, school board, and ideally committee members. So Valley City, for example, we have our first public meeting next week. There's a couple of committee members that are actually taking a slide. This one makes sense to me. This one makes sense to me. Or I feel passionate about this, because they're all educated. They should be just as educated as the board is on the issues. Really, we should be there to make sure that you have facts behind all the questions, provide, I would say, professional opinions and professional input when needed. But it shouldn't be, and this is another thing we've learned over the years, where it shouldn't be, as much as I love to hear, my own voice, I shouldn't be the one saying everything. It should be that we are your advisor, but along the same lines, though, we do make the presentation because that's our job, right? Your world isn't making a public presentation on facilities. So we work together, we make the presentation, even the committee will have input on the presentation. And then ideally we present it all together. So if, let's say it's 10 slides, there might be one slide that's ICON, but we're standing there right next to you because every slide will have a question. And sometimes that's us. If we're able to get a construction manager hired, you either want to hire them right away or you hire them after the vote. Those are kind of our two opinions. If you have a construction manager on board right away, then they're at the meetings. If you don't want to hire a construction manager, you could even sometimes we hire them as just a cost consultant. Just, hey, will you please pay them $1,000? They still have to go get the work if they want it, but can you do costing and can you come to the public meeting? So those are all things that you can do and options. We've done it without, we've done it with it. We will roll with it. And even if you don't have those partners, we'll still end up calling a few to get costs, because we do design, we have lots of historical data, but we still like to ping people that are actually in the construction field to just get the most up-to-date numbers.
We'll be at every
Every-
single.
you'll never
single
not have
meeting
it.
We will be at.
Unless you don't want us there.
So I guess my question would be, how does ICON different from like ICS when we tried to put this information out? School finance is incredibly difficult to understand. How do you put that out to the public so that they understand it? Because I feel like that was one of our biggest hurdles last referendum, is that people just truly did not understand how school finance works.
Yeah. 100%, yeah. And I think, so here's a graphic. I think you had all of this information, but I think sometimes it might have been too much. You can have too much wording and you cannot have it explained simply. And so what we try to always do is like, can we get a chart or a graph or something to break down in a simple manner? Okay, so you have $30 billion of needs upcoming, and 21 of that is mechanical. And then you can break down, the different parts of your building to understand, here's the different pieces. And so for example, looking at this Mandan graphic, you could see like the Brave Center, the top line, there's $82 a square foot of needs. And if you're trying to build a school, and let's say school's $350 or $400 a square foot, well, at $82 a square foot, it makes sense to keep maintaining that, right? But if we get to the point where it's a higher number, then you can say, all right, well, let's have a logical debate. I don't think that it makes sense to try to say you need anything new here. I think it's just, how do we find the right way to break down the information to get it very clear? Let's give you some
I'll
more
say this
examples.
too, honestly, there's gonna be people out there that they're not gonna believe it no matter what. Like, you can put it in front of them. Like when we did our referendum, we had Zap, Golden Valley, and Dodge, all three communities consolidated into Beulah. So our community meetings, we had one in Beulah, one in Zap, one in Golden Valley, one in Dodge. And I can remember showing slides just like the one that he just showed, which was very clear, but people still didn't want to believe it. Finally, I'm pretty sure I broke down in the meeting, and I basically just said, like, this is our issue. Like, I'm not lying about our issue. These are our issues. You can't afford it. And there's some, if you're in the ag community and you can't afford it, then by all means, I respect you to vote no. Like, go ahead and vote no. But I'm not up here to tell you that our information is incorrect. It is what it is. This is our issues. This is what's going to happen if we don't do anything. But go ahead and vote no. I'll respect you. You can please respect the numbers, but vote no. So we had to have a human moment. And I think in that moment, like, I think it told people, like, look, they're not here to buffalo us. They're here to tell us their issues. And we as taxpayers have to go back and decide, can we afford this? Can we not afford this? And so regardless though, people are I had one guy absolutely hated me, like took us to the Attorney General 3 different times. Luckily he failed, but I mean, we had a guy that was just totally against the project, didn't want to believe anything. There are going to be those people that are going to vote no matter what you put in front of them. So
We don't have any.
yeah, you do.
No.
Everybody does. Everybody does.
There was no sarcasm
No,
in that.
no. But so like, here's an example of, we often will go in and people will just say, why does it cost so much? I don't understand. And as a public entity, there's rules that you have to follow that the average person, they could build a closet, they can build a shed. They don't have to worry about electrical, sidewalks, legal permitting, making sure that you meet ADA codes, sprinkler systems, so, this was a transportation facility and, we had some folks that are like, well, I can build that for $1 million. Absolutely. We can build it for $1 million too, but then you have to do all the other things that the school has to acquire. And so for them, this was in Crookston actually, and the vote failed at $3.4 million. And then we were hired, we brought it back at 3.2 million. Not a huge difference, but with better ways of explaining it, it passed very easily. And the key was the first time they tried to pass, I would say they didn't have enough simple information. And they also didn't have a group of people that were understanding how the decisions were made. So, here's another example. of, this is just Crookston, but just to give you an idea. So the group sitting around the table, they were like, how can we build what we need? You know, there's a lot of different ways to solve this problem. So we went through it as a group and said, okay, well, we can build one building that's pre-engineered. We can build one that's heated, non-heated. We can do stick frame. We can do this. And at the end of the day, we said, all right, what do you want to do? You know, and they picked the solution that was kind of in the middle, not necessarily the cheapest and not the most expensive. And it just, it's how we need to just give people the data in a way they can understand, and they will tell us what to do. If they don't tell us what to do, we're not going to.
And you're gonna have folks that are just gonna be like, well, I can do this for this much, or I can get this and do this. And at the end of the day, DPI and the Century Code is very specific on what you have to have, right? If it's above a certain threshold, you have to have professional services.
And we know that there are creative solutions to maybe, let's say, break apart projects, or let's say do things differently to skirt the rules. And I would just say that there's absolutely ways to do that. We just don't support it because ultimately the rules are there because you guys are a public entity. You guys are going to be liable if anything happens. You know, if you replace something and it's the best job ever, but that thing that you replaced fails and it leaks and it destroys something, your insurance company is going to say, okay, let's see your specs. And because the insurance company wants to sue whoever did it wrong. And you're going to say, oh, our specs there are no specs, or we don't have stamp drawings from an engineer or an architect or whatever. And so then it's just going to be the school liable. We don't like it, but it's just the way the world works. And so we would just strongly recommend, and we will work through that with the committee, that yes, there might be different ways to attack things, and some things might be acceptable and some things might not. But at the end of the day, we do think that the rules are there for a reason, and to try not to deliberately skirt them.
Well, people through there because it's taxpayer, all of it.
Well, that's too.
So, I mean, it's plain and simple.
Yeah. And you know, another example I think I shared with the committee was, you know, ADA accessibility is not a choice. All you need is one community member. It doesn't have to be a student. If a community member can't get access to a space that should be public, by law, you have to accommodate that. There was a family that challenged Dakota Prairie School District, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the school district lost. So you don't have the ability to say no if someone demands it. So most districts are working by the grace of their community, and I know that most school districts are trying to do the right thing, are trying to get there, and so most people will work with them. But just know that, again, that's not like our agenda, it's the law, you know.
And that's another reason why I would never not have a CMAR or professional services, because school districts should never have to fall on liability. Liability should not fall on guys. School districts are trained to educate students, right? You're trained to look at budgets as board members. We're not trained to do construction. So that's the other reason I would never do it different. I always have professional services so they can sue out there. That many nights laying in bed, not sleeping, wondering what the heck's going on. I'm pretty sure I called Ohio 100 times and never get 100 times. I realize maybe there's a niche for me. Working that in the icon world.
Yeah, I mean, so when we leave here, we're driving to Valley City to go meet with the superintendent there, and he texts us before 7 a.m. sometimes. And yeah, so it's fine. It's fine. If I see it, I'll just but yeah, so this is just what we do. Like the vast majority of our days are spent solving these same problems. And I just say, you know, Oaks doesn't need a new wheel. The wheel will work. We just have to kind of trust in the process. And at the same point, understand that our job is, regardless of what we're doing here, is just to earn their trust. That's all we're trying to do. We earn their trust and then we get made whole. So we're going to do everything we can to make things clear, to share the information, make sure people feel like their voice is heard, make sure we answer all the questions. Like that's our business, really. At the end of the day, we do that right, and then we get to be government.
So if we all agree to the contract this morning, what would the next step be?
Next step would be for us to meet with the committee, and then we would get a couple of engineer consultants that would come walk the building with us, start reviewing documentation. We would strongly recommend you look at that proposal. It's $3,500. I mean, that's a steal based on what they normally charge. I think they're very eager to work with us. And so I would just love it if you guys did that, because the amount of data, and that's a year of their dashboard too. So it's like, it's really, it's gonna be
And just a reminder, when we bring engineers in or whatever, that's not a bill to you.
Yeah.
This other service would.
we will tell you before, we don't nickel and dime. I mean, a great example, the Mandan High School, that's like our 9th project with Dr. Biz. We started working with him in Hillsborough 23 years ago. And it's like, you got to pick up the phone and you can't nickel and dime. Like, if you just do those two things, like generally people keep hiring. So we think that's worth spending money on. We think like a survey might be worth spending money on. It might be worth spending a little bit of money on a contractor to just be our cost consultant. But again, like, we're going to walk in here with electrical engineers and mechanical engineers that think like us, and they know they're not getting paid either unless the system comes, or unless a solution comes out to the community. So when you see us with engineers in here, again, like, you're not paying them. We're not paying them. They believe in our process to where they'll drive out into the middle of nowhere and do it with us too, not here in the middle of nowhere. Actually, I'm just saying they'll go anywhere. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Bainville, Montana, but yeah. So, yeah.
I was gonna say, they don't know where the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, yes. So that, yes, and even that's not that. All I'm saying is you guys are, if you do something, you're doing the right thing. And if you have no risk other than you guys are gonna let us spin our wheels and try to find a solution. And if we can't find a solution, then, I mean, that is what it is.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, so I will entertain a motion to approve the contract with Icon Architects. Carlson moves, do I have a second?
Second.
A second. Can you call the roll, please?
Rhonda Day.
Thank you.
Yes.
Patty Carlson.
Yes.
Sheila Nagel.
Yes.
Brian Sire.
Yes.
Monica Heidbuck.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item 6, future meetings. Our next regular meeting will be on Friday, May 16th, which is also the last day of school. Regular meeting for June 23rd is what we have set, and we have that set because our election is on the 10th. By law, we have to canvass the vote 13 days after. Being as it's a Monday, we have tentatively set it at 7 p.m. if that works for everyone else. Yes. And then our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, July 8th, and I believe that's a little bit off from our regular schedule just because I think both Shannon and Anna will be gone then. And then that'll be our reorganization meeting as we will have. That'll be the beginning of our new year, so.
7 a.m. that day, or do you just want to wait for the time to tell later? Is nighttime better?
Solar.
Okay, let's just keep it at 7.
Yep.
And then one more item for the good of the order. We have graduation coming up on May 18th. And we need a board member hand out diplomas. I think in the past, Sonia has done it. Does anybody have a strong urge to do so? I will do it. I just didn't want to take that away from anybody else.
I didn't even
know. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, we will adjourn this meeting at 8:09 a.m. Thank you.